Hey, I heard your mom is in Brooklyn, right?
My mom?
Yeah.
No, she's in Atlanta.
Yeah. Well,
I
by
haven't-
the way, how do I launch this? I mean, am I on now?
I think so. It's 12.
Now live. Okay. Hi, everybody. As you can tell, I'm very new, to all of this. So first of all, I want to thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the 24th edition of ADAMA Art Salon. ADAMA is an acronym for the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta. ADAMA is a new museum concept that centers on global Black experience of the 21st century and beyond. The museum's motto, "Everywhere we go, there we are," is an affirmation of the indelible legacy African descended people around the world, and a reminder that we are one family. My name is Arturo, Lindsay, and I'm happy to be the host today in conversation with my former student and ahijada, Amy Sherald. Welcome, Amy. Bienvenido.
Bienvenido.
Okay, this edition marks the anniversary of the first year anniversary of the ADAMA Art Salon. It is the brainchild of Dr. Fahamu Peku. Fahamu and the executive board of ADAMA wishes to thank the artists, curators, collectors, and attendees who continue to make this program a success. There is a little commercial announcement here. There'll probably be a couple as we go through. Be sure to visit adamatl.org/store to purchase a swag, or as a Latino would say, un tumbao, including the redefinition long sleeve t-shirt. I just purchased a t-shirt this morning from Adama. You should see it. It's really beautiful, well designed. But also understand, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about patronage also understand the necessity, of supporting Black cultural organizations and Black artists and artists of the African descent, of the African diaspora. Now to Ms. Amy Sherald. Bienvenido, welcome. Tu familia del Taller Portobello manda amor y cariño. Your family of Taller Portobello in Panama send their love and their regards. Okay, so buckle up, let's get started. In order to stay focused, as you will note, I am looking at some of my notes because there's a tendency that I can go off on tangents. I don't think anyone that knows me will ever say that I make a long story short. Okay, so my short stories are always long. So I've gotten notes. Notice I'm already off on a tangent. So anyway, so that was it. But I want to thank Cornelia, by the way. She was very kind by sharing with me the video, video conversation that you had with Franklin last week. That was for your first solo West Coast exhibition, the Great American Fact, at the Hauser and Wirth. Then I said it's open last week. I thought the conversation was brilliant, and I will encourage the audience to head to Hauser and Wirth's website to see the exhibition, and for the folk in Cali, make an appointment to visit it in person. In your conversation with Franklin, it seemed to be very relaxing. However, you were dealing with really major ideas. It was very philosophical, very art historical. It was wonderful in ways in which that your work, got placed, within the intellectual community, period. Dealing with the arts, dealing with aesthetics. So let me ask you, how did you feel about the conversation? What was your takeaway?
I always enjoy speaking with Franklin, and it was a press preview conversation. So those conversations are a little different than what you might have at a museum, and in front of the public audience. Mm-hmm. But I think that I was able to kind of get the general points across about why I named the show The Great American Fact, and hit on the points of just embracing my own Americanness, presenting these moments that I like to call the dash, we tend to focus on the beginning of our lives and the end of our lives, and there's just really special moments that happen in between.
Mhm.
And I've just been really having a great time capturing these moments, with paint. And I call them very American moments. So the work is also, I was able to speak about shifting the perception of what it means to be an American.
Correct.
And, if we are to believe in this American experiment, then when somebody speaks about an American girl, then you should be thinking about many kinds of American girls, Black girls, Asian girls, Latin American girls. And yeah, that was the general conversation.
And to push that a little further also, well, as long as you've known me, for me, the term American applies to all of the continent.
Right.
I find it sort of cultural appropriation, when we refer to American and just referring to the United States. America is all of us. I was born in Panama, makes me an American. Somebody born in Cuba, they are Americans as well. And so I like what you're doing and expanding, and I'm also really, I find that important because many of my African American or U.S. African American, as I would say, friends find it difficult accepting that American, and so much blood, sweat, and tear, of that they, via their ancestors have spent in building the wealth of this nation and building the wealth of Europe. They're not to claim, I got problems with that. But I'm glad that you're opening that door. And when I was talking before about art historical, you not only dealt with it art historically, you also dealt with it historically. And I want to come back to that though, because since I thought that what you guys accomplished was so perfect, that I want to get to that what you were talking about, that other space, but I want to get a little bit before and talk about the beginning and move on. If I would like to, Fahamu's listening on this, I'd like him to put up the video so that, folk could at least see, the exhibition as it is right now. Not a video, I think it's, there it is. All right, there you go. So your audience, will have an opportunity, to take a look at some of the images that are in the gallery now. And while that's happening, just let me move on. I want to start with the present exhibitions, which we're doing, virtually viewing the work. And then I want to take a leap back to the past, to our past, yours and mine, because we spend a lot of time, together. And what I think I like to do, what I'm trying to do is sort of encapsulate this so that a viewer, who's seeing the present, can take a moment and go back to the past and see the journey, you have walked. Too often, when someone has become successful, people talk about, oh, how lucky she is, or find all other kinds of reasons and excuses, and they miss the hard work and the dedication, that the artist has put in. So that's where I want to go. I want to go, I want to start off, with you as in your latter part of your student years, and move forward. But before I go though, the important thing about this exhibition is you introduced, the Anna Julia Haywood Cooper, and I have to say I'm so very sorry that it's not someone I'm really familiar with, So can you tell us a little bit about her and why The Great American Fact? How she inspired you to title the work, your exhibition, The Great American Fact.
I came across her work in reading a book by a writer and a professor named Kevin Quashie, and he quoted a paragraph that I don't have memorized, but I think it's on the Hauser website. He quoted a paragraph that was connected to that title, and it just really struck me, and I sat with it for a while. I tend to push the word American into a lot of things that I do because I'm trying to drive home a point.
Mm-hmm.
But so I took that title and kind of connected it to the work that I do. I think her and I both start out at these similar similar places of trying to objectively look at the public identity of Blackness, that looks like, versus for me, the interior life of who we really are. These moments that happen for us day to day that were never really fully captured or fully rendered within American art history, and in American realism, which is like how I kind of place myself within that genre. And it's just really about the fact that I can connect it to many different things. So like one thing it makes me think of is just this rise in interest in Black artists, and that we, and not me, but these artists that came before me, we've been here, they've been there all along, not the same amount of recognition until later on in their lives. And that curators have been curating, we've been making work, and they've paved the way for me to be here. And that's a fact for me, that these American artists were making work and putting themselves out there in a way to give us opportunities to be where we are now.
Absolutely.
And then, when I was when I met the couple that I painted in the painting called American as Apple Pie, I was in Brooklyn, and I was visiting my partner's mother, and the young woman is somebody who he grew up with as a child. So they still live in that house. His mom still lives in the same apartment. And I didn't go over there looking for models, but after hanging out with them for about 15 minutes and hearing about their love story, how they met, they both collect cars, they connected, they have a family, they participate in car shows. It's just a very American thing, it's just some things that I felt like for a while I took for granted, because when I grew up in the South, even seeing an American flag made me feel uncomfortable, because I didn't have a real connection to it in that way. So I did not speak. I never had the opportunity to speak about myself and use that language about myself until I traveled abroad.
Right.
Specifically, an incident I had in Norway where George Bush Jr. was president, and a lot of time, like at that time, the world had really protested against going to war, and he had pushed us into a war. So people were like, American, and it didn't matter about my skin color. They just didn't, it was just American. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like that was, I'm so used to my skin being the first thing that people see. And it was what came out of my mouth that signified to them that I was an American, and that's all that mattered at that moment. It didn't matter that I was Black. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting. It was interesting to feel surprised, pleasantly surprised, and almost enjoyed from that incident. So I've really been working on that idea and examining that since then. And that was over a decade ago.
Right.
And I've just made it my, what's the word? Like I made it, it's just what I want to do. It's just really codify who we are within American history, because when people speak about the past, they tend to only speak about, when we're not speaking about the past, when other people speak about the past, they tend to only speak about our forefathers, and they just grow silent on like this, the real underbelly of like what this country is and how we came to be. And I think that's really important, and that we should have a huge sense of pride about that, and not let people that want to take the flag and use it in another way, because patriotism for me means something completely different. To take it back, because it's mine too. And
absolutely.
My
Absolutely.
people fought wars, and my people have been here in this country, you know,
Mhm.
as long as your people have. So
Absolutely. And longer.
longer. So
And
I'm like,
longer, most definitely. And that's not only just for the United States, but that's throughout throughout America, you
yeah.
know. But
Mhm.
you just eliminated about 3 or 4 questions that I had for you in your little talk. But you hit on some points. You talked about reality, et cetera. But let's go back for a second, and I'd like to swap some early reflections, that we have of each other. I got 3 that I want to mention. But let's take you back to your to being a student, and walking into my studio, in at Spelman. What were your first impressions? What were your expectations?
I walked into painting one just hoping that you would let me join the class because I think the class was full.
Right.
I had just had this experience with an older guy. He used to sell like prints and stuff on the avenue.
Mm-hmm.
As I was leaving campus and walking up the avenue to my dorm, he would be out there every single day, like selling prints and art and like all kinds of different stuff. So I had talked to him one day briefly, like you see somebody every day, sooner or later, you're like gonna strike up a conversation. Um, and I was like, I'm an artist too, you know? And he was like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. He said, well, show me some of your work. And all I had was like this one drawing that I had done in high school that I had gotten honorable mention for at the University of Georgia. They had this like juried exhibition for high school students. So I ran back to the dorm and I got it and I brought it back. And he really liked it. And he said, are you an art major? And I was like, no, I'm not an art major. Like, my parents want me to be a doctor. So I'm pre-med and not doing too well at it. And he told me, he said, if you don't use your talent, you're going to lose your talent.
Right.
Something in that moment triggered enough fear for me to go against my parents and pursue what I really felt like I was put on this earth to do.
Right.
I joke around and say I'm a one-trick pony. But so that was it. So when I walked into your class, like I just knew I really wanted to be there. Like I had a new zest and passion for my college education at the moment. I was not truly motivated up until that moment when I changed my major.
Right.
And my GPA shot up after that year because I was like actually doing something that I was interested in. So I don't remember exactly, but I feel like I kind of begged you to let me in.
You did. Convincingly.
Okay, I'll work free. I'll cut your grass. Like
That's it. You knew how to go to humor. But I tell you what, let me respond to that very quickly. And again, you answered a couple of questions that I have here waiting, to ask you. It says, I think we've been hanging around each other way, way too long because you know what I'm going to ask and what I'm going to say and vice versa. But anyway, I remember that very first day, but I also remember a resemblance, which by the way, I think Cerny, remember that we met up in Maine, just dropped me a note earlier saying she's going to be, joining this talk. But nevertheless, one of the things is that I just felt an energy, in you, and that's one of the wonderful things about being a teacher, an educator, is that you could feel the energy, in a student. You could feel the lack of energy, and I knew that there were a bunch of students that were in that room, with taking pain in one, because they had to fulfill some box, but that they would come late to class and all of that. So when I felt your energy on that first day, I'm like, you know what, hang around for a minute, because certainly the next day, I mean, and I used to close the door, at 1 o'clock, you're either in here or you're out. And if you're out, you better go get another class because that's the way it's going to be. So I knew that there would be room for you, so I had you came in. But let me give you one of my early recollections. Within the first couple of weeks, right after I let you into the class, you show up with a black eye. You remember that? And I'm like freaking out. It's like, here it is. I'm just beginning to teach at a women's college, and here's the student, and I just, brought in, and I think she's got all this potential. She's got a black eye, And so how do you ask her, what happened? And of course, as a male professor, you don't want to talk about the woman's body. I finally break down and I ask you, so why don't you tell your listening audience how you got that black eye?
I was boxing.
And thank God it was a short-lived boxing career.
It lasted for about 2 years.
Thank God it was a short-lived. That was much longer. I know that your parents and I, stressed the whole time that you were doing it. But nevertheless, let me jump forward. I mean, I certainly want to stick that in there as a joking reminder, since you always talk about how I made you cry. But the thing is, and also you were a pre-med student, at that time, but it was the energy that I saw. It's the same kind of energy I saw in Fahamu, I saw in Kalida, and a bunch of other people, going Lori Kumbo, not for, making art, but, for, taking care of art.
Mm-hmm.
But you in particular, my takeaway from those early memories, has a lot to do with your interest in the Black body, and particularly the Black female body. So as I look at your work, as it continued to grow, it's a consistent line, and so what I'm saying is that from this early position, and I like, the listening audience, to hear this, from the very, very early days, there was that, issue of the body. I remember you and Kalida, as a matter of fact, being very healthy eaters, and when you came to Panama, with this woman called the Summer Art Colony, at the end of 10, 12 hours of painting, you and Kalida went out running, on the bay. So all of that, I think, fed in. And I saw that, when you became, a little later, when you became an advanced painting student, you began to use your own body, as a subject, for some paintings. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Well, I kind of had no other choice because nobody wanted to pose for me. Fine, I'll just photograph myself. So that's how it all started. But then you introduced me to Frida Kahlo, and then I was like, oh, this makes complete and total sense.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was doing something special. And then you're like, no, you're not special. Here goes Frida Kahlo. She did that. Special.
What you did that was special, though, and here it comes to the notion of reality. So there's a bunch of things here I want to weave together, is that those paintings, you were dealing with, you were playing around with an alternate reality. I remember you did certain things with your eyes, with your nose, with your lips, with your ears. Remember your back, the
external spinal cord.
Spinal cord, you have them protrude a little bit more, the environment. I refer to this stuff as really magically real. I don't think surreal, captures it any more than it captured it for Frida Kahlo, but you created this, sort of alternate, reality environment. And you treated the environment, the negative spaces, some will call, with as much care as a positive space. I continue to see that in your work today. You want to, share some thoughts on that?
What, like my backgrounds?
Yeah.
Yeah. They are very similar now that I think about it. And they haven't changed much, to be honest, now that I think about it too. So I guess in college, that all started because I started late and you were like, I'm gonna allow you to do like directed studies or something like that. And so I was like, okay, well, I took painting 1, now I'm just gonna start working on my studio practice, which at that point in time, I didn't even know what to do. And I was like, I don't know what to paint. Mm-hmm. And you said maybe you should start with yourself. Mm-hmm. But the work, I had never read Octavia Butler, but the work was almost illustrating some of her stories, which was interesting. I didn't come to read her work until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
Because I don't like science fiction, but then I was making these paintings that were like kind of science fiction. But I think what's similar with the work now, especially now that I've moved away from these singular figures, is that there's the kind of low horizon line, which I broke out of with these last works. I felt like that was a way for me to still get the same effect of having an individual, like the flat surface with the single figure.
Right.
I had a low horizon line with the figure, so it would just be like this much land and then that much, sky.
Sky, right.
But the backgrounds have always tended to be one color or one color with a little bit of texture in the background. So what I call like just leaving the figure in a liminal space.
Right.
Not neither here nor there. Very sparse. So the alien women that I was painting, they were, in a place that had like just dirt and a few rocks, and that was it. And I think when I think about that, I think about the rocket ship painting that I did. I always forget the titles of my own paintings. The rocket ship painting that I did, because it was the same kind of environment with a little more embellishment in the sky and then in the treatment of the rock clouds.
Well, one of the things that and FAM has put up a show. I was holding that for a little bit later, but that's okay. Might as well leave it up because we're talking about the earlier work. This is not student work. This is when you're an emerging artist, already, and you're moving forward. But there was something that I want to hit on, because you got in the conversation with in Franklin when you were talking about Alice Neal's work. You made a statement, said painting isn't about realism, And the more I've always thought about your work. That's why I use magical realism for your work. I don't have another, I wish I could find another word, for that. But it casts in a much broader, space, and certainly your experiences in Panama, in Portobello, with me, and in Peru, there's a certain kind, and that's what I'm saying with Frida Kahlo, and that's why I sent you in Frida Kahlo's direction as well, because in Latin America, particularly with, people of African descent, people of indigenous, descent, etc. There are other kind of belief systems, that are out there. So these other realities coexist with the physical reality, But there's something else that you said when what you found in Alice Neal's expressionist paintings was an energy not every artist can engender. This is what you're saying. You want to say an energy in a work that holds you, I will call that what the Yoruba will call is the ashe, the life force. I mean, and I think about when I've curated your work, and even though I wasn't in Cali, I wish I could have been, and I hope that your audience, remembers seeing, about the amount of space, that's between, these very large, paintings, is that, there's so much ashe, there's so much life force that you embed, in the works of art, that they have to have a space, if you're going to truly experience it. Tell me, what do you think about that? I have something else I want to add on, but what do you think about that, the energy coming out of your work? How do you feel that? How do you experience it?
It's hard. It's something that's difficult to put into words. I just know when I see it, and I know when it's not there. And I learned how to see that when I was studying with Arturo in Norway. He pointed it out between two landscapes. So it wasn't even any people in the painting. There were just two landscapes that were rendered similarly and painterly, but one of them was alive and one of them wasn't. And it's just really strange to look at that, because somebody could tell you about it and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, like that really is something. But they both paint and a paintbrush. So I don't really know how to explain it. I just know it happens. And I don't know how to explain it, because it's just something it's like I just say there's little gremlins in my studio that come overnight and like do special. I don't really know how to explain.
You know,
Because
go
like
ahead.
Alice Neal has that. Like she has that in her work. You know,
Mhm.
her people don't have to be um fully rendered like a photograph in order to be alive. Like they're just alive. And like you said, like she, you know, she was able to capture their life force, which
Right. Well, the well, you know, I've been writing. You know, my scholar side, you know, I've been writing about the concept of ashe, you know, as a life force and how you encounter it in work. And this past Saturday, while you were having your opening out in California, I did a performance art ritual in which I was burning some paintings. You know, well, you know that, you know, there was a fire in my studio and some work got damaged, you know, et cetera. And so I decided one of the things I was going to do, you know, is have a performance art ritual in which I will burn, you know, a number of, you know, paintings, because I realized I wasn't a good custodian of the work. So I had to release the ashe that was in this body of work. And it's remarkable the responses I'm getting, you know, where people are talking about that experience and looking, you know, at work, you know, being burned. But the issue also is that they all have the image, you know, in their heads, which is what we do anyway. The object, you know, is not the object is good, you know, to sell, to get bread and butter, you know. But you know, the object, all it does is holds the energy, and you have an ability, you know, to capture, you know, that energy, and that it's for a large number of people to experience. And on that note, I want to take you to, I'm skipping past, you know, a number of my questions, but one of the things that you talk about, and Faham, if you could put up the Michelle Obama, you know, painting with the little girl, one of the things you talk about, you know, and I remember you saying this when, you know, even when you were a student, that you didn't see yourself in museums. You know, you did not see yourself, you know, in galleries, and did not feel a sense of ownership. However, you have a policy. You know, we spoke about this quite a while ago, and I'm trying to, you know, well, you can freshen up in terms of where you want your work to land and what collections, et cetera. Can you expand on that?
I think I'm not sure if we're speaking about the same thing. I just remember saying that like start, I didn't become an artist for the work not to be on museum walls.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's what makes a difference because these institutions tell us, you know, they show us what's valuable.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to be, you know, a part of those institutions. So that's always just been a goal of mine, like not even really at that time, not really even knowing the importance of like, you know, what that means for an artist's career as well. But it was just like this work needs to be seen by everybody. And it's not just for, you know, it's not FUBU, it's like for the world and FUBU at the same time, you know. So it's, I make it for us, but I also know that this work could be possibly an introduction to a viewer of the Black experience that they will never get anywhere else because maybe they've only engaged with Black people, people of color through this public identity that, you know, how the media portrays the Black body.
Right.
For me, it was really important to make sure that that happened.
Mm-hmm. How important is it for you to have your work in public collections so that a vast number of folk can see it?
It's really important. I mean, it's important for your career because that's
Sure.
how you maintain relevancy. And then I think it's really important for me because I'm a Black female American painter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a female painter and I'm a Black painter, like all these different things. And there's, I mean, I feel like we can probably count on two hands, maybe 1.5 hands of how many Black female figurative painters there are in this world.
Mhm.
Maybe have been, like, right, in art history. I'm sure there's some that I don't know about, but I mean, like the ones that, you know, have representation are in museums. And so I think it's really important because, you know, it's fine, but all of my stories up until the time I met you, my work and life as an artist were inspired by white men and the images that white men made.
Mhm.
And that's just the way that it was. Like, I'm totally okay with that. It's fine, but I know that I can make a difference. And so that, you know, someone else can have something else to look at, something that looks like them,
Mhm.
they can relate to beyond composition and paint.
Precisely.
And I think, you know, its representation is really important. I mean, I think we talk about it a lot, people, you know, but it's really important. And I don't think that I had a moment when I was at the National Gallery looking at this gold relief of General Sherman and some Black soldiers.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, like it really moved me to see myself rendered in that way.
Precisely.
It hit me in that moment. I was like, it must feel effing amazing to walk around a city and to see yourself everywhere you go. Like, there I am on a horse, and there I am holding a rifle and a, you know, it's like, it's
Precisely.
consciously affirming
Mhm.
because I have come across, um, you know, I have white friends whose our lives have been very similar. So, you know, parent was a doctor, went to private schools, went to college, got a master's degree, but it kind of stops there because when we enter into a room, we enter into a room very differently and feeling very differently about who we are, no
Mhm.
matter what,
Mhm.
you know. So all that was going through my head when I was looking at that relief. It's like I, you know, I mean, I make a joke and say like I have to start entering into the room like I'm a white man, like.
I can see you doing that.
And pretty soon that's going to be entering into the room like I'm a Black woman because like that's how I'm entering into the room as fully me. But even as a, you know, as somebody who's like subconscious and shy and like an introvert, like I had to learn how to be in public and like public speaking by imitating people.
Mhm.
Um, and that's how I did it. Like I would watch people who I liked, I would emulate them. So it would be Oprah, it'd be whoever, like I pick up traits of their personality and just be that when I felt uncomfortable because I was like having to, you know, extrovert. And that's
Mhm.
like outside of my comfort zone. So when I say like walk into the room like a white man, it's like wear that like
Mhm.
don't you don't care because y'all here for me.
I can see you doing that as a performance art piece also, you know, off Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue. Let me switch back a little bit because a little earlier, you know, you were talking about those early years, but I want to talk about patronage, and I want to go down two roads at the same time. You know, I want you to speak a bit about your. I remember there was an aunt that you had an aunt that was very very supportive, you know, of your career, you know, your emerging career as an artist, and believed in you, but also, you know, helped you out financially, you know. And if I'm not mistaken, I think she actually purchased a ticket, you know, for you to go to Panama, to Portobello, as well as when, you know, I had the show with the Lima Bienal, you know, to send you down there, you know, as well. So I wanted to talk about that, you know, in terms of, because I want my baby boomer brethren, you know, to hear this, you know, and fully understand that young black emerging artists need to be supported, you know, be it someone in your family, you know, be it someone in your community, etc. Because as my famous adage, you know, is, you know, starving artists die,
Mm-hmm.
dead artists don't make art.
Yeah. It,
Contemporary contemporary artists are the chroniclers, you know, of a generation. If they die, our descendants will know nothing about us. You got the ready to say something. Go ahead.
no, yeah, I mean, it is really important. And I think we also have to remember, because my parents weren't pro Amy being an artist, but it dawned upon me that my mom was born in 1935,
Right.
like in Alabama. So life for her and my dad was just about survival.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, so for me to say, hey, mom, I want to be a painter, she was just like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't even comprehend it. It's incomprehensible.
Right.
Worst thing that I could have ever said to her.
Yeah.
Didn't fully understand it. And now she understands it because she's been able to live it.
Of course.
But she had never seen it. I never grew up seeing an artist, any Black artist, but she also never grew up seeing anything, So it's difficult because you want your kids to be okay. You want them to have money. You want them to have the 401k. You want them to have retirement. And then they go tell you some loosey-goosey, like, I want to be an artist. And you're like, you're throwing your life away. Like, Martin Luther King fought for you to not be an artist. Like, that's the so I think for me, if I wouldn't be here, if it wasn't for, my aunt, and for these other moments in my life where I was able to have financial support and then also given the space to make the work.
Right.
It's just not possible, so I worked really hard, but I also somehow was able to have, through you, like, opportunities to go to Panama, traveling to Norway, like all these little moments of exposure, like really built the right foundation in order for me to do these things that I needed to do. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have made it, because you can't make it by yourself.
Yeah. Well, we want to come back to your parents for a minute, though, because, again, fully understanding, what you were saying, in terms of, coming from where they were, and where they had gotten, and the objective was to, continue moving on up. The one thing that I will give them, I'll give them credit for a whole bunch, of stuff, is that they weren't necessarily putting blocks in your way. They were like raising questions. I can't tell you that I had more conversations with your mom, than I did with your dad. Your dad was always kind of like, look at me and say, is everything okay? Yeah, I think it's okay. Don't worry, she's going to be all right. And I was a bit nervous as well, also, because you were young and you were exploring and you were going through all kinds of stuff, coming from this little small conservative, city, in Georgia, in the South, but they were there. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm hoping that our audience is hearing this, is that, the contemporary artist needs that kind of a support, because today we are very proud, of what you're doing, in the with your work. Also understanding that your work is also going to be in many museums, not just in the United States, and not just African American. And I'm glad that there are in African American and African diaspora museums, but across the world. And so a little Black child in Zimbabwe, will be able to walk up to one of your paintings, and see it, and someone in Lima, Peru, etc., in Panama City at the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo, etc. So I think that is really, patronage is a really very important thing. And that leads me to one last question. I think we're going to be wrapping up soon. But let's talk about Taller Portobello, because the patronage of your aunt and the support of your parents, gave you an opportunity to go to Portobello, to be there right in the beginning when the Taller Portobello was being developed, and when you talk about the seeing, in the museum and seeing, the soldiers, et cetera, that, could be representative of you. What do you think about what kind of impressions did the Congo art, the artists of Taller Portobello have on you?
A whole lot. I mean, when I talk about my palette, I always connect it back to being there. And then I remember this one moment when one of the kids was asking you to show him how to paint.
Mhm.
I believe it was like tattoo. I can't remember, but you said no because
Mhm.
it's gonna change what you do. And that was really a profound moment for me because I understood exactly what you meant. Because what they make, like the workings behind you, what they make is
Mhm.
beautiful. And it's like, it's so special because it comes straight from inside of them.
Correct.
It's it's the desire that I have to that I wish I it's what I had what I wish I had because I know that since the time that I was born I have been told everything, seen everything, you know, like nothing is really pure.
Mhm.
And I felt like this work that they make, it's pure.
Yeah.
You know, like
Let me I'm sorry.
I had art history in my head, you
Mm.
know, anything. Like I always make a joke about listening to Luther Vandross and like hearing what it's like to fall in love before you even know what love is. So
Mm.
like no experience is ever like a pure experience. And I felt like what they make is just a truly pure thing that is authentic to them and only them.
Right. But let me clarify a couple of things. It wasn't tattoo. It was Janeka.
Okay.
And that occurred right here in Atlanta in my studio at Spelman College. And what Janeka was asking, because he was painting bastones at the time, the walking sticks, and hoping that this film, broadens all of this. We may in fact use a couple of quotes from you tonight, today. But what he was asking me was to teach him how to paint in a Western European style, which is what I was teaching. I was teaching a form of realism. I love that. I love that. That coming back to that notion of what is real, what is reality, what is the alternate reality, etc. And it's the same as that word American. As you begin to pull things apart, we're in a very exciting place. So what I said to Janeka, Janeka had been a Congo since he was 12 years old. Janeka was in a culture that was hundreds of years old. For me to start overlaying perspective and color theory. How am I going to teach somebody color theory that living in the middle of the tropics? They're seeing the colors back and forth. And on this, I don't know if you were on that trip that we took a walk when Janeka said, everybody stop. We go, what? So look at the snake. And we go, what? And the snake had frozen, and looked like a branch. He was able to see separate, the snake, with the trees that were in back, you know. So no, it was about having him, I'm walking by your side. I never abandon anybody, So the no was no, I'm not going to teach you a Western European nemesis,
Right.
form of painting, but I will walk with you, as we go along. And I'll be giving you suggestions and ideas and also taking ideas and suggestions back up into my own work. But I love this, as you're saying, this is pure, and that's what we're trying to preserve, at Taller Portobello, and hopefully, through this film.
Yeah.
I'm looking up at the time, and I think that, Fahama told me that we should hold about 15 minutes. Are there any specific, any things that you want to, I got a bunch of questions here, but anything you want to add? Before we, try to take some Q&A?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Now I hope I'm going to do this right. Let's see if I hit the Q&A thing here. Okay. There's a Janice Miller says, if you don't already get addressed before the Q&A, my questions are for Amy. How did studying in Panama with Arturo impact Amy's work? Has she returned to Panama since? For Arturo, are there any current projects that he is working on with the artist community in Panama? Thank you. So you want to, I think you've pretty much answered some of that already, right?
I haven't been back. I do want to go back, but I haven't been able to make it back.
Right. You haven't been able to make that trip, back, but we're expecting you, and right now we certainly want to make sure that, the COVID is out of the way, in order to do that. Well, you may not have been back Well, you were back several times after the initial, because you went back and did install my work.
I went there every summer all the way through grad school almost, or at least every few years I was doing something for you. I was working for you or, working on a project or
Mhm.
yeah, I feel I've 5 or 6 times in, I was going and then I hit grad school and then life changes
And then you left me.
and then you got an adult, so you can't go spend summers in Panama.
Anyway, and to the I too wrote something also to this person, to Janice. My email address is arturo.lindsay@gmail.com. Drop me a note and I'll tell you what's going on in Panama, or go up to congoartfilm.com and you see the projects we're working on now. So Arturo says, I remember Professor Arturo always stressing to students the importance of taking care of your physical bodies, because if you care for the tools like your hands or bodies, then you will also be able to take care of your studio practice. My question is, what sort of self-care routines do each of you practice in order to care for your physical bodies? Thanks. Thank you both for having this conversation. You want to go first? How are you taking care of yourself?
I'm trying to find balance with my schedule. One thing that comes along with success is like more hours working. And so there's some days, like getting ready for the show, I was working 6 days a week and I didn't work out. I think I worked out 3 times. I was just always tired and then always in a rush to get to the studio. But I would say meditation, but I normally don't meditate until it's emergency meditation, which means it's like you do this or I'm going to shut down. But meditation, breath works, and just walking. If I can't work out, then just going for a walk. But I think remembering to breathe, I think is the most important thing. I think when you feel stressed out, you tend to shallow breathe. And for me, that usually leads to migraines. But just remembering to breathe and take a moment, 15 minutes, just to sit with yourself and just be present with your breath. And I'm not like a meditation coach or anything, but I've done it and I understand the benefits of it, even though I don't do it until it's like an emergency. And just drinking water, eating well, and trying to laugh as much as possible.
That's a very important one, and I think even before that is smile. We can't smile very much right now because of the mask that we wear. But one of the things I've gotten into the habit of recently, is I'm walking down the street, make eye contact with someone and just smile. And you know what? 9 out of 10 cases, you get a return smile. I will just ditto much of what Amy has said. And frankly, what I have been, one of the good takeaways that I have from the pandemic is that I'm in shutdown 23 hours a day, but I take that 1 hour, and I walk. I try to walk up to 3 miles, at least anywhere between 3 to 4 times a day. I mean, a week. I try to do 7, which means I end up doing 3 to 4. And I also got, turned on to Qigong, and that's been pretty good. And of course, meditation. So did all of that stuff. And by the way, Atu is a very, very fine painter. He's one of my, a former student of mine as well. So let's go on. Hey, Opal is there. Opal says, so wonderful to be able to participate in this conversation and celebrate you and your work. I'm wondering if in what ways you are in conversation with other Black women artists, especially is this a very particular moment in life, nation, and art, especially in this particular moment in time in nation and art.
Yeah.
On you.
We're in actual literal conversation. I feel like I talk and speak to my contemporaries very often about everything. I'm oftentimes on FaceTime painting in my studio while Jordan Castile is painting in her studio, or the same thing can happen with Deborah. We're building our practices now, and we are experiencing a lot of the same things. And so, we're having conversations around how to manage our money, what are our strategies, and like, now we're here, so like we got to make sure we stay here, so like challenging ourselves, just everything. Like Jordan and I both have some physical issues, and so it's always great to call her and just tell her how tired I am, because I'm always a little tired because of medications that I have to take to keep this organ in my body from my heart transplant and the issues that that brings. And so finding understanding in that, because a lot of people don't know that, and you have a lot asked of you all the time, um, all of a sudden, and you I I had to get over feeling guilty for saying no, because you can't be pulled away from your studio or yourself all the time like that. Um, and you want to give to the world, but they have to just get it from the work. Because sometimes it's just a lot, like a lot of interviews and stuff, it just becomes a lot. So we oftentimes talk about that, and just how to try to find balance, like within success, because it comes with its sacrifices, and those sacrifices are real, and they usually are physical and mental.
And I tell you, Faham and I absolutely appreciate your coming on today, given the fact that you were just hung a major show, in California, and done a major interview, at least one that I saw. And I know that the critics must have been after you as well, so you're coming out, and hanging, would appreciate it. I have one more question here, and I think I only have a few more minutes left. This is from Arthur Smith. It says, my son and I just saw The Great American Fact on Friday. Bravo. How long did you take to ideate the work?
So I got back from Atlanta, where we spent most of COVID, in May, and then I had to move in June, and then the talk of the show came up for February. And I took the show because in my mind I was like, 6 months is a long time. But then it takes time to think about what the show is going to be. So I probably spent 4 weeks thinking of ideas and then scouting locations for the shoots. So about that long. I mean, that's like 4 weeks, pretty much all day, like considering different compositions and like different kinds of, outfits and like car. I knew I wanted to do something with a car. I couldn't figure out what it was. And then that worked out surprisingly. So everything, I just wake up and let the day lead me. I don't do a whole lot of planning. I find joy in what happens organically for me. And it's just when it does work out in that way, like it's just affirming that I'm moving in the right direction, if that makes sense. So I think of stuff that I want to, I paint things that I want to see, and then I try to make it happen. If it's too much resistance, then I'm like, let me try to choose another path, and then things just kind of fall into place. But it was not a lot of time to get that show together, but I was able to pull it off.
Excellent. Amy, there are 2 minutes. So these are not questions. I went over to the chat, and this dude I went to high school with, ran track with him as well, Bill Wiggins. I call him Rabbit, and he writes a note here. It says, Arturo Pepe, kudos to you and Sister Amy. Bill Wiggins, the Rabbit, okay? You also somebody that Jose Cooper, says, a good Panameño, Colonense, says, saludos, and thank you for your invaluable contributions to the Black experience. And there's just a bunch of wonderful things. Opal wrote a couple of things. So glad to know that Black women artists are talking on a regular. That's excellent. I mean, I think Black poets do it. Well, here's Renee that I work with Intozaki. So this is amazing. Thanks for inviting me, Arturo. So anyway, I think that's going to be a wrap, mi querida. And who's that back there?
That's George.
Is that August? August, ¿qué tal, papi?
That's George.
Who's that? That's George? Okay. Because see, his back was to. Oh, all right, his back was turned to me, and I haven't met George. I know August. Anyway, let me stop there because we're getting personal now. All right. Listen, mi querida, te quiero mucho. Okay. Abrazote de parte de Panamá, de los puertorriqueños. Te quiero mucho. All right. Thank you, my dear.
Wow.
And everybody, thanks a lot for tuning in.